In the darkness of tragedy and power, an unknown woman changed the course of history without anyone realizing it. She is Abishag, a small girl, not a warrior or queen, but holds the key to one of the most important transfers of power in Israeli history. Not only was Abishag a servant to King David in his final days, but she was also a model of sacrifice and silent service. So why could a character like her have such a strong influence on the life of King Solomon and the entire kingdom of Israel? How can a silent act, never recognized, create great change? The story of Abishag is not simply a small detail in the Bible, but also contains profound lessons about service, sacrifice and God's divine plan. Let's dive into this story to explore the connection between small actions and big results, highlighting the importance of each individual in God's grand plan. As King David entered his final years, he was no longer the strong king who bravely fought and won glorious victories for Israel. Instead, people saw an old king, his health was declining, and he was no longer able to rule as before. The last months of his life passed in the darkness of illness and weakness. This scene caused everyone at the court to face an important question. Who will inherit the throne and protect the stability of the kingdom while the founder no longer has enough strength? This is the moment when the role of Abishag, a young, beautiful and pure girl, becomes an indispensable element in this story. Abishag, from a wealthy family, was chosen as a servant to serve King David not only because of her beauty, but also because of her virtue. In ancient Israel, when a king was facing physical weakness, a young, healthy, and pure beautiful girl like Abishag would be chosen to take care of him and keep him warm. Her role was not merely physical, keeping King David's body warm, but also symbolic of maintaining order and power in the kingdom. During long nights, she would lie next to the king, bringing physical warmth to the needy king. But this action itself carries a profound meaning about the connection between generations, the connection of power, and the continuation of tradition in ancient society. For Abishag, her role was not only to care for King David in his time of weakness, but also to reflect a meaningful transition of power. When a king like David was near and far, his position in society was not only that of a leader but also a symbol of strength, stability, and traditional values. In that context, Abishag, even though she was just a young woman, had a greater mission than just keeping the king warm. She becomes a vital cog in a society where power is not only secured through battles but also maintained through personal relationships, wise choices and blood bonds. System. When looking at Abishag's presence, we cannot help but notice her contribution to the larger picture of power and family in the court of Israel. Although she did not directly participate in the power struggles, her selection as King David's keeper created an indispensable element in the transition of power. Although Abishag had no official power, her presence unintentionally created a change in the way the princes and other powerful people in the court viewed power. One of the important elements in the story of Abishag is the fierce rivalry between King David's princes, especially between Solomon and Adonijah, in their struggle for the throne. King David's death created a power vacuum and unleashed a fierce struggle, while Solomon, son of Bathsheba, had the support of many at court. Adonijah, one of King David's eldest sons, also refused to sit idly by. Abishag's story becomes more complicated as she is not only a caretaker for the king but also an important factor in this power struggle. The relationship between Abishag and King David, although seemingly simple, was part of the picture of power at court. Abishag was not a directly powerful figure at court, but her choice to serve King David exerted a powerful influence. She became a symbol of the continuation of power, the protection of values in society and the connection between generations in the kingdom. Although she has no power in her hands, she becomes an important link in a power relationship, where every action, no matter how small, can create profound impacts on the future of the nation. When King David died, Abishag became the focus of a power struggle between Solomon and Adonijah. Solomon, with the support of Bathsheba and those loyal to him, won the throne. However, Adonijah did not give up his ambitions, and tried to take advantage of the situation to usurp power. During a meeting of princes and powerful people in the court, Abishag, although not playing a major role in this war, was an important factor that made the power struggle more complicated. The fact that she was King David's keeper, a man chosen for her beauty and virtue, made her an important symbol in determining who would continue to hold power in the kingdom. We can see that, although Abishag's role in the struggle for the throne was not a decisive factor, her presence played an indispensable role in the transition of power. Abishag's story is a vivid illustration of how power is not only secured by physical combat but also maintained through relationships, subtle choices and decisive actions. Icon. Abishag, although not a figure of official power, was an indispensable part of the complex power picture of King David's court. Adonijah, King David's eldest son, is a complex figure in the historical story of Israel. After King David died, Adonijah was not simply a son mourning his father, but also a man with great ambitions for the throne of Israel. In a society rife with intrigue and power struggles, Adonijah's actions were part of a sophisticated political strategy that reflected the values and ways in which power was built and maintained. A dynasty is gradually weakening. The political strategy of Adonijah, son of King David, is a testament to the sophistication and astuteness in the art of competing for power in a society full of political intrigue. After King David's death, the throne was not clearly divided, and while God had chosen Solomon as his rightful heir, Adonijah, as David's eldest son, could not easily accept his fate. His destiny. Born into a royal family where power and succession to the throne were factors in determining destiny, Adonijah saw an opportunity for himself when his father passed away. Unlike the other heirs, Adonijah did not directly confront Solomon but instead implemented a strategy that seemed harmless, but in reality contained a plot to assert his power. To better understand this strategy, we need to look at the social and political context of the time. King David ruled Israel for many years, and the throne was not only a symbol of power but also associated with the stability of the kingdom. When a king dies, the struggle for power is not only a confrontation between princes but also a battle of wits between forces in the court. And Adonijah's case. Although he was the eldest son and had the natural right to inherit the throne, God's choice of Solomon caused Adonijah to find another way to achieve his goals. One of the first strategies Adonijah implemented was to ask Solomon's mother, Bathsheba, to ask Solomon for permission to marry Abishag, the young girl assigned to care for King David in his final years. On the surface, this may seem like a simple request, but if looked closely, this is an action with a clear purpose. Abishag is not an ordinary woman. She was someone who had been close to King David, and the king's son marrying her would have the effect of strengthening his power in the eyes of the people and in the court. In Israeli society at that time, marrying a woman related to the previous king could be seen as an act of acknowledging the power and legitimacy of the person behind the throne. Therefore, Adonijah's request to marry Abishag was not simply an emotional act or personal need. This is a carefully calculated strategy, aimed at usurping Solomon's power. In this way, Adonijah not only wanted to take over a part of King David's past but also wanted to establish his rights in the royal court. Normally, such a request would not be considered a serious threat. But for heirs to the throne like Solomon, it was a great danger. Solomon, despite his youth, soon realized that this was not a casual request but a strategic move. For Adonijah, This was a clever way to position himself as a counterweight to Solomon and assert his power in the eyes of the people. The relationship between Bathsheba and Solomon also played an important role in Adonijah's choice of this method. Bathsheba was a mother who loved her son. But she could not help but acknowledge that Solomon was not only her son but also God's chosen one. Adonijah's action of asking Solomon's mother to ask him for help is a clever way to take advantage of family relationships. Taking advantage of the mother-child relationship to achieve his political goals. Adonijah, while not directly confronting Solomon, struck a weak spot in the royal family's relationship. A subtle cunning in the art of politics. When Bathsheba came to Solomon and asked to allow Adonijah to marry Abishag, Solomon immediately realized the hidden meaning behind this request. Solomon was not a man easily fooled. And he understood that this was not a simple request but a political ploy to create a counterweight to his power. With the intelligence and wisdom given to him by God, Solomon understood that if he allowed Adonijah to fulfill this request, he would create a dangerous precedent and could lose his power. Solomon not only protected the throne, but also had to protect the kingdom from political plots that could cause instability. One of Adonijah's first steps was to act on a seemingly innocuous request. Asking Solomon's mother, Bathsheba, to ask Solomon for permission to marry Abishag, the girl chosen to care for and keep him warm. King David in his final years. On the surface, this action appears to be a simple request, with no deep political implications. However, it was in this act that Adonijah tried to assert his power, in a way that only those who understand society and politics can recognize. Abishag, the young woman chosen to serve King David in his old age, is often viewed simply as a caretaker. A figure of compassion and service in a time when David's health was failing. However, in the intricate web of ancient Israelite politics, Abishag was much more than a simple caregiver. She was a symbol of political power, a key to legitimacy, and a pawn in the games of succession. Her importance in the political maneuverings of Adonijah cannot be understated. For in asking to marry her, Adonijah was not only seeking a personal connection, but making a calculated move to strengthen his own claim to the throne. In order to understand the depth of Adonijah's request, one must look at the symbolism surrounding Abishag's role in King David's life. At the time, Israel's monarchy was not just a position of leadership but a central piece in a complex political system. Power was as much about perception as it was about bloodlines or divine appointment. Abishag's role as a young woman brought into David's chambers to care for him had layers of significance. She wasn't simply a caretaker in the physical sense, but also someone who symbolized the king's vitality and lineage, especially in his waning years. In a culture where a king's strength was tied to his ability to rule, to lead, and to continue his bloodline, a woman like Abishag was more than just a personal servant. She was a part of the monarchy's ongoing narrative. Adonijah, as the eldest surviving son of King David, was well aware of the delicate balance of power in his kingdom. Though Solomon had been anointed by God to succeed David, Adonijah, with his political acumen, understood that legitimacy in the eyes of the people and the court was not always about what was divinely ordained. Rather, it was often about what appeared to be true in the eyes of others. Thus, when Adonijah sought to marry Abishag, he wasn't just asking for a woman to be his wife. He was seeking a piece of King David's legacy. Marrying a woman who had been so closely associated with the late king would, in the minds of many, serve to elevate Adonijah's claim to the throne, making it appear as if he were the true heir to David's power. Abishag's symbolic value was enormous. In the ancient world, a son of the king who married a woman so closely linked to the monarch would immediately strengthen his position in the royal hierarchy. The union would not only solidify his role as the next ruler of Israel in the eyes of his people, but also give him the respect of the court and the royal family. It was a move that would make his claim seem more legitimate, more rightful. Because it tied him directly to David's legacy. This is what makes Adonijah's request so significant. It was a subtle yet powerful political maneuver. One that many would not have immediately recognized. But one that would have enormous consequences. When viewed in this light, Adonijah's strategy becomes even clearer. He wasn't simply trying to secure a personal relationship with Abishag. He was aiming to use her to cement his place as the next king. By marrying Abishag, Adonijah would be aligning himself with the image of King David. Aligning himself with the power and authority that David represented. In doing so, he would be asserting that his claim to the throne was not only legitimate, but also in the best interests of the people. The people of Israel, after all, were just as concerned with the continuity of the monarchy as they were with divine election. They wanted a king who was connected to the past and who could ensure stability for the future. Furthermore, the marriage would give Adonijah credibility in the eyes of those who might have been skeptical of his claim. Adonijah was not the son chosen by God for the throne. Solomon had that honor, but through his marriage to Abishag, Adonijah would be able to draw on the symbolism of David's kingship to convince others that he was the rightful ruler. This was a move to persuade the nobility, the military, and the people of Israel that he was not just a son of David, but an heir to the throne in every meaningful sense. It's important to recognize the role that the royal court played in this strategy. The court was not just a place for ceremonies and formalities. It was the center of political power, where decisions were made and where alliances were forged. To be part of the court, to marry into the royal family, was to become part of the political system itself. Adonijah understood this better than most. Which is why he carefully calculated his move. His request to marry Abishag wasn't made in isolation. It was part of a larger strategy to strengthen his position within the court. To position himself as a key player in the royal drama that was unfolding. But while Adonijah's strategy was politically astute, it was also a gamble. In his eyes, marrying Abishag was the key to securing his future and the future of his dynasty. However, what he failed to account for was the strength and wisdom of Solomon, who recognized the true meaning of this request. Solomon understood that Adonijah's actions were not innocent. They were a direct challenge to his own claim to the throne. Solomon knew that for the stability of the kingdom, he could not allow Adonijah's strategy to succeed. To do so would have been to undermine not only his own legitimacy but also the very foundation of the royal family's authority. In many ways, this moment exemplifies the delicate balance between personal ambition and political reality in ancient Israel. Adonijah, through his marriage proposal to Abishag, sought to blur the lines between personal desire and political necessity. He understood that in the world of kings and princes, power was often determined not just by what one was born into, but by what one could acquire and manipulate. Abishag, in her own way, became a symbol of this power struggle. A pawn in a much larger game of thrones. Solomon, though young and inexperienced in the ways of the royal court, quickly grasped the gravity of Adonijah's intentions. The plot to marry Abishag was not simply about a personal desire or romantic interest, it was a clear political maneuver aimed at strengthening Adonijah's claim to the throne. Solomon, inheriting his father David's kingdom, understood the fragile nature of power and the need for decisive action. His response to Adonijah's challenge was not only a matter of protecting his own claim to the throne, but also an essential move to safeguard the stability of the kingdom and its future. Adonijah's actions were a calculated play for power, using the symbolic value of Abishag as a means to position himself as the true heir to David's throne. By marrying her, he hoped to align himself more closely with the late king, creating a perceived legitimacy for his reign in the eyes of the people and the court. In ancient Israelite society, where kingship was not only a divine right but also a political reality, actions like these had profound implications. Abishag, who had been so intimately connected with King David in his final years, was seen as a part of his legacy. And any son of David who married her would be seen as claiming that legacy for himself. Solomon, however, saw through Adonijah's move immediately. His response was swift and decisive. Solomon's young age did not diminish his ability to assess the political landscape with the sharpness of a seasoned ruler. He understood that in this moment, he had to act not only as a son of David but as the rightful heir according to God's plan. The throne was not just a position of power, it was a divine trust. And Solomon knew that to allow Adonijah's plot to succeed would be to undermine not only his own claim but also the stability of the kingdom that had been entrusted to him by God. Solomon's decision to execute Adonijah was a powerful statement. It was not a knee-jerk reaction to a personal betrayal. It was a calculated move to ensure that his authority as king would not be questioned. Adonijah's marriage to Abishag, had it been allowed to proceed, would have served as a silent but powerful usurpation of Solomon's power. By executing Adonijah, Solomon effectively cut off this challenge before it could gain any real traction. This act demonstrated Solomon's ability to make hard choices in the face of political maneuvering and his willingness to sacrifice personal relationships for the sake of the greater good of the kingdom. Furthermore, Solomon's response was not just about silencing Adonijah. It was a message to the entire court, to the nobles and officials who might be watching, and to the people of Israel who were looking for stability after David's death. By dealing with Adonijah's plot decisively, Solomon showed that he was not a king to be trifled with. His swift action reinforced the idea that any attempt to disrupt the kingdom's peace and stability would be met with the full force of his authority. This public execution also served as a warning to other potential challengers within the kingdom. It was a reminder that the throne was not a position to be won through subterfuge or manipulation, but through the divine will and the support of the people. Solomon's actions ensured that there would be no ambiguity about who held the throne and who was in control of the kingdom. By eliminating Adonijah as a rival, Solomon reinforced his legitimacy in the eyes of the court and the people, ensuring that there would be no further threats to his reign. The decisive nature of Solomon's response reflects a deeper understanding of leadership and the challenges that come with power. Solomon, in his wisdom, recognized that leadership was not just about making decisions but about making the right decisions at the right time. His ability to act quickly and effectively in the face of danger demonstrated a level of maturity and understanding that went beyond his years. It was a testament to the wisdom that God had promised him, the wisdom that would define his reign as one of the most prosperous and peaceful in Israel's history. Moreover, Solomon's decision was a reflection of his understanding of the political realities of his time. He knew that the kingdom's stability depended on the strength of the ruler and the ability to maintain control over the royal court and the military. By eliminating Adonijah, Solomon not only removed a threat to his reign but also sent a clear message that any attempt to destabilize the kingdom would be met with swift and decisive action. This message was not lost on those in the royal court, who understood the stakes of power in ancient Israel. Solomon's response also had a personal dimension. As the rightful heir to the throne, he had been raised in the shadow of his father, David, and had seen the political challenges that came with the position. He knew that in order to secure his place as king, he had to assert his authority early and decisively. Solomon's decision to execute Adonijah was a reflection of his understanding that power must be wielded with both wisdom and strength. It was not enough to inherit the throne, one had to prove oneself worthy of it through actions, not just words. The execution of Adonijah was not a simple act of vengeance, but a clear demonstration of Solomon's ability to navigate the treacherous waters of royal politics. It was a reminder that, In the world of kings and thrones, power was not something that could be easily taken or assumed, it had to be earned, defended, and maintained. Solomon's wisdom and decisiveness in this moment would go on to shape the way he ruled throughout his reign, ensuring that his kingdom would remain strong and stable in the years to come. As Solomon continued to rule Israel, his wisdom and ability to make difficult decisions would serve as the foundation for his legacy. The lesson of Adonijah's failed plot and Solomon's swift response is one that transcends the political landscape of ancient Israel. It speaks to the nature of power itself, the understanding that leadership is not just about occupying a throne but about securing one's position through wisdom, strength, and the ability to see through the complex motives of those around you. In many ways, Solomon's response to Adonijah's plot is a story of how to handle power and responsibility. It is a story of recognizing the challenges that come with leadership and responding with wisdom and authority. Solomon's actions in this moment were not only about securing his throne. They were about laying the groundwork for a reign that would be remembered as one of peace and prosperity. His ability to see the bigger picture, to understand the implications of Adonijah's actions, and to respond with decisiveness is what ultimately set Solomon apart as a leader. The execution of Adonijah marked a turning point in Solomon's reign. A moment that demonstrated his understanding of the delicate balance of power and the importance of maintaining control over the forces that sought to disrupt it. It was a moment that solidified his position as the rightful king of Israel. And it was a lesson in the importance of acting decisively in the face of political challenges. Solomon's wisdom, strength, and ability to see through the machinations of those around him would define his reign and ensure that his kingdom remained stable for years to come. Adonijah's story is a clear demonstration of the complexity and sophistication of dynastic political strategy. It shows that power does not always come only from strength, but also from the ability to perceive and exploit the elements around you. Adonijah's actions, although sophisticated and scheming, ultimately could not change the outcome predetermined by God. Adonijah's story also shows that, in power struggles, intelligence and sophisticated strategy do not always bring victory. In a society where power and politics play a decisive role, a leader like Solomon cannot rely solely on these strategies to maintain power, but must always listen and obey God's will, who arranged everything. Although Adonijah's story can be seen as a lesson in power, it is also a reminder of the importance of loyalty and adherence to moral and religious principles in a life. Society. We can learn from it that real power is not just about winning political struggles, but about the ability to maintain fairness, integrity, and love in society. Abishag, though her role in the biblical narrative is brief, embodies a profound lesson about humble service. Her presence in King David's household as a young woman, chosen to care for the aging and ailing king, is a subtle yet powerful illustration of the ways in which God works through ordinary individuals and seemingly small actions to fulfill divine purposes. The significance of her service lies not in the grandeur of her actions but in the quiet, faithful manner in which she contributed to the king's final days. Her role reminds us that yet they may be central to the unfolding of God's larger plan. Abishag's service was not one of power or acclaim. She did not seek a position of authority or influence. Rather, her task was to care for a man in his final days, to offer comfort in a time of frailty and decline. In a world where power and prestige often dictate value, Abishag's story teaches us that the simple acts of service, done without recognition or reward, are not only valuable but may be critical in God's design. Her unassuming role demonstrates that God often uses the meek and humble in ways we may not immediately recognize, shaping history through their quiet faithfulness. It is a reminder that true greatness in God's eyes is often measured by humility, devotion, and the willingness to serve without seeking fame or acknowledgement. As we delve deeper into the implications of Abishag's story, it becomes clear that her role in King David's life is not isolated. There are other women in the Bible who have displayed similar qualities of service and humility, which have had profound effects on the course of biblical history. One such woman is the Shunammite woman mentioned in the Book of Kings. Like Abishag, she was a woman who served without seeking attention. Yet her actions led to remarkable blessings. In the case of the Shunammite woman, her hospitality toward the prophet Elisha resulted in the miraculous birth of a son and later, the resurrection of that same son after his death. This story, like Abishag's, speaks to the power of selfless service and the unexpected ways in which God uses individuals to accomplish his purposes. The connection between Abishag's story and that of the Shunammite woman is not merely a coincidence. Both women, in their humble service, played pivotal roles in the unfolding of God's will. And both remind us that God works through ordinary people in extraordinary ways. Their stories underscore the profound impact that acts of kindness, service, and faithfulness can have in the divine narrative. They teach us that we do not have to occupy a position of power or recognition to be used by God. Rather, our willingness to serve in humility can open the door to divine intervention and blessing. Moving beyond the personal examples of Abishag and the Shunammite woman, we can also look at the broader biblical narrative and recognize how God consistently uses individuals and events that seem insignificant to achieve his greater purpose. Abishag's humble service is a microcosm of this divine principle. The Bible is filled with instances where God uses the least expected individuals, such as a shepherd boy to become a king, a woman of low status to become the mother of the Messiah, and a humble servant to catalyze significant historical shifts. These stories are not just historical accounts. They are profound lessons in how God's sovereignty and grace operate through seemingly mundane circumstances. The narrative surrounding Abishag, Adonijah, and Solomon provides another layer of reflection on the power dynamics at play in the kingdom of Israel. And it invites us to consider the broader theological lessons embedded within it. While the story begins with Abishag's service to King David, it transitions into a complex web of political intrigue, where the ambitions of individuals like Adonijah challenge the divine order. Yet, through Solomon's wisdom and decisive action, we are reminded that God's purposes will ultimately prevail, even when human ambition seeks to undermine them. In this way, the tale of Abishag serves not only as a reflection on humble service but also as a backdrop for exploring the themes of divine justice, sovereignty, and the unfolding of God's will through the lives of his chosen leaders. The lessons we can draw from this narrative are multifaceted. First, we are reminded that God does not operate according to human expectations of power or success. The kingdom of Israel did not rise and fall on the strength of military might or political maneuvering but on the wisdom and guidance of God. Solomon's rise to the throne and his ability to navigate the treacherous waters of court politics demonstrate that true power and authority are not about force but about wisdom, discernment, and a willingness to align one's actions with the will of God. Solomon's decision to deal with Adonijah decisively was not an act of personal vengeance. Rather, it was a demonstration of the kind of leadership that is required to preserve righteousness and justice. Through Abishag's story, we are also reminded that the influence of one individual, no matter how seemingly insignificant, can have a lasting impact on the course of history. Her service to David, though it appeared to be a small, quiet role, ultimately played a part in the larger narrative of Israel's history. Her humble service was woven into the very fabric of the kingdom's transition from David's reign to Solomon's. Just as a single thread in a tapestry can contribute to the overall design, so too can small acts of service and faithfulness contribute to God's greater purpose. Another important lesson that emerges from the story of Abishag is the reminder that the path to greatness in God's eyes is not always the one that is most visible or celebrated. In a world that often places value on outward achievement, status, and recognition, the example of Abishag teaches us that true greatness lies in the unseen, The quiet acts of service and sacrifice that are done for the glory of God rather than for personal gain. Abishag's legacy, though not one of fame or power, is a testament to the enduring value of serving faithfully, even when the world does not acknowledge it. This brings us to the central message of the story. God uses every circumstance, every individual, and every action, no matter how small, to fulfill his divine plan. The lives of Abishag, Adonijah, and Solomon converge in a story that speaks to the broader theme of divine providence and the ultimate triumph of God's will over human ambition. In the end, it is not human schemes or political machinations that determine the course of history, but the unwavering sovereignty of God. Through the lessons of Abishag's service, Adonijah's ambition, and Solomon's wisdom, we are reminded that the path to true power is not through manipulation or force but through humility, service, and a steadfast commitment to doing what is right in the eyes of God. These biblical stories are not just ancient tales of kings and queens, but timeless lessons that speak to our own lives today. They remind us that no matter how small our role may seem, no matter how humble our service, we are all part of a much greater story, one that is unfolding according to God's perfect plan. Our actions, no matter how unnoticed they may seem, can have profound consequences. Whether we are serving in quiet humility like Abishag or making difficult decisions like Solomon, we are all called to play our part in the grand narrative of God's kingdom. The story of Abishag is a wonderful testament to the power of silent service and the profound meaning of each role, no matter how small, in God's plan. Although she is not a central figure in the Bible, Abishag's appearance in King David's life is an important detail, opening up deep connections about how God uses those who do not stand out to carry out his great program. Her short presence demonstrated that, in the eyes of God, no act of service is meaningless. Abishag's silent but faith-filled actions not only brought comfort to King David in the last days of his life, but also created significant changes in Solomon's succession to power. Although he does not pursue power or prominence like other characters, Abishag has become a symbol of humility and loyalty. Her story shows that, in God's eyes, every act of service, no matter how small or unnoticed, has immense value. Abishag may not have been the one who directly made revolutionary changes in Israel's history, but what she did silently contributed to the realization of God's great plan. This is an important message for all of us. It is not always about big, loud, or outstanding actions that can change the world. Sometimes, small but sincere actions can have the most profound impact. One of the highlights of this story is the message that each person has an important role in God's eyes. Abishag, a young woman with a seemingly simple and insignificant role, contributed significantly to the continuation of David's line and the advancement of Solomon. Each of us, no matter our position, can play a part in God's plan, as long as we are faithful and serve with humility. Abishag's story also reminds us that seemingly meaningless moments in our lives can become integral parts of God's grand plan. Remember, sometimes, when we feel unrecognized or don't see the value of the work we are doing, God is secretly using us to do something bigger. An important lesson from Abishag's story is that service does not have to be ostentatious or outstanding. We live in a world where many people seek recognition and glory. But this story reminds us that God does not measure our greatness by external achievements. Silent service and dedication to work, no matter how small, can create much greater impacts. Abishag, for her role in the royal palace, may not be remembered as a hero in Israeli history, but her service contributed to the steady continuation of David's dynasty, which was not the case, cannot leave its mark in God's plan. We cannot help but mention the relationship between Abishag and other stories in the Bible. While Abishag served King David, We also see the service of other female characters such as the Shunammite woman in the Book of Kings. Neither sought prominence or power, but their service ushered in miraculous results, such as the Shunammite blessing of receiving the prophet Elisha. These stories confirm one thing: humble acts of service, even though unnoticed, are sometimes the factors that create important turning points in history. Abishag's story is also a reminder that everything, from small actions to great events, is part of God's plan. Events that seem insignificant in our lives, like the appearance of Abishag in David's palace, may be important parts of the grand plan that we cannot immediately see. Every moment of our lives can be part of a larger story that God is writing. And when we take small, faith-filled actions, we also contribute to the realization of that great plan. The story of Abishag is a testament that everyone can become an indispensable part of God's work. No need to have a high position or power. Sometimes, it is the small, silent actions, but full of devotion and love that can change a whole history. Abishag may not have directly created revolutionary changes, but her role helped pave the way for larger events to come. This is a reminder to us that in God's plan, no task is too small, and each of us can make a difference. When we look at the life of Abishag, an obscure woman in the Bible, we realize that small, seemingly insignificant actions can leave a profound mark. In God's great plan, we, like Abishag, may not always receive recognition from the world, but in God's eyes, every act of service, whether silent or simple, has immense value. Her story is a reminder that, in this life, no matter where you are or what you are doing, always trust in God's guidance. Every day, listen to His words, and let Him perfect you, because each of your actions has a noble purpose in His grand plan. Follow Abishag's example and live with humility, strong faith and absolute loyalty to God. Small actions today can change the future. And who knows? One day you will find yourself an important part in a great story that God is writing. Never give up, because God always sees you. If this story touches your heart, don't forget to share and support the channel so we can spread these messages of love to more people.